café was packed that Tuesday evening, filled with the hum of conversation and clinking cups, when a woman's quiet sob cut through the noise like glass shattering on concrete. Zoe Carter sat frozen in her chair, her hands trembling as the man across from her, perfectly groomed in an expensive suit, held up a crumpled $5 bill between two fingers like it was contaminated. $5. Marcus repeated, his voice dripping with theatrical disgust. You brought $5 to a date? What did you think we were going to do, split a muffin? Laughter erupted from the nearby tables. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, is this really happening?" A woman in the corner actually stood up to get a better view. Her expression caught somewhere between pity and entertainment. Zoe's face burned with humiliation so intense she thought she might actually faint. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to wake up and discover this was all just a nightmare. But the cold metal of the chair against her back was too real. The stares were too real. Marcus's cruel smile was devastatingly, painfully real. I didn't know we were. She started, her voice barely audible. Going somewhere nice? Marcus cut her off, leaning back with a smirk. Yeah, I figured that out when you showed up in that dress. What is that, from a thrift store clearance rack? More laughter. Zoe felt tears pressing against her eyes, hot and insistent. She blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of these people, in front of him. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that in the far corner of the café, hidden behind a newspaper and a carefully positioned plant, sat Julian Caldwell, one of the wealthiest men in the city. And he was watching every excruciating second unfold. He had orchestrated this entire disaster. He had hired Marcus. He had selected this café. He had even suggested Zoe's friend set her up on this blind date. And now, as he watched Zoe's hands shake and her eyes glisten with unshed tears, Julian Caldwell felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Regret so profound it made his chest physically ache. But he didn't move. He didn't intervene. He just watched as his carefully planned experiment destroyed the dignity of a woman who had never done anything to deserve this cruelty. Zoe finally stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Every head in the café turned toward the sound. She grabbed her small purse, the only one she owned, and walked toward the door with as much composure as she could muster. Her legs felt like water. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall until she was outside, until she was away from the cameras and the stares and that horrible man's satisfied grin. She made it exactly 3 steps past the café door before the sobs broke free. This was supposed to be her one nice evening, her one chance to feel normal, to feel like someone worth knowing instead of someone worth overlooking. She had counted her money 3 times before leaving her apartment, hoping against hope that $5 would be enough for a coffee, maybe a pastry if she was lucky. She had worn her only good dress, the blue one she'd found at a thrift store 2 years ago, the one that made her feel almost pretty when she looked in the mirror. She had dared to hope, and hope, she now realized, was a luxury she couldn't afford. Inside the café, Julian folded his newspaper with careful precision, left $40 on his table for a $12 coffee, and walked out the back exit. His driver was already waiting, the black town car idling in the alley with its tinted windows concealing him from the world he'd just observed so coldly. "Home, Mr. Caldwell?" the driver asked. Julian stared at his reflection in the window, seeing something in his own eyes he didn't particularly like. Yes, home. But as the car pulled away, he couldn't stop seeing Zoe's face, the exact moment when humiliation had crashed over her like a wave. He had wanted to see dignity under pressure. He had wanted to find someone real in a world of phonies and social climbers. Instead, he had just become the villain in someone else's story. And the worst part, he'd gotten exactly what he'd looked for. Zoe Carter had shown remarkable restraint, maintained her composure far longer than most people would have, and walked away without causing a scene despite having every reason to flip that table and scream at Marcus until her voice gave out. She had passed his test, and he had failed hers. Zoe barely remembered the bus ride home. She sat in the back, her face turned toward the window, watching the city lights blur past through her tears. An elderly woman in the seat across the aisle kept glancing at her with concern, but Zoe avoided eye contact. She couldn't handle kindness right now. Kindness would break her completely. Her apartment was small, a studio in a building where the heat worked sporadically and the neighbors fought loudly at 2 in the morning. But it was hers. She had scrubbed every inch of it until it gleamed. She had covered the water-stained walls with fabric she'd bought on clearance. She had made it into something that felt like home, even if it looked nothing like the mansion where she worked during the day. She kicked off her shoes, the only pair of heels she owned, bought specifically for tonight, and collapsed on her bed without bothering to change out of the dress that now felt like a costume, like evidence of her foolishness for thinking she could be someone different for one evening. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Lena. "How did it go? Tell me everything." Zoe stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Not great. Talk tomorrow." She turned off her phone before Lena could respond with follow-up questions. She couldn't talk about it, couldn't relive it, couldn't admit out loud how thoroughly she had been humiliated. Sleep came in fitful waves, interrupted by replays of Marcus's face, the café's laughter, the cameras that had probably already uploaded her worst moment to the internet for strangers to mock. She woke up at 5 in the morning with swollen eyes and a headache that felt like her skull was being squeezed in a vice. Tuesday was her day off, but Wednesday morning meant returning to work, to the Caldwell mansion, where she cleaned floors that cost more per square foot than her annual rent. She put on her uniform, a simple gray dress with white trim, and stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her eyes were still puffy. Her face looked hollowed out. She looked exactly like what she was, someone who'd been crying all night. The bus ride to the Caldwell estate took 45 minutes. Zoe spent the entire time rehearsing a neutral expression, practicing the smile she'd need to wear if anyone asked if she was okay. By the time she reached the mansion's service entrance, she almost believed her own performance. The house was quiet when she arrived. Most of the staff didn't start until 7, and it was barely 6:30. Zoe preferred it this way. The peace before everyone else arrived, when she could lose herself in work and forget, temporarily, about everything outside these walls. She was polishing the brass fixtures in the main hallway when Lena found her. "There you are," Lena whispered loudly, rushing over with concern written all over her face. "I've been texting you all morning. What happened on that date? Are you okay?" Zoe focused very intently on a particularly stubborn spot on the door handle. "It didn't go well. That's all. That's all." "Zoe, look at me." Zoe reluctantly met her friend's eyes. Lena's expression softened immediately. "Oh, honey, what did that asshole do? Can we not talk about this here?" Zoe glanced around nervously. "I just want to work and forget it happened." "But, please, Lena." Lena hesitated, then squeezed Zoe's arm gently. "Okay, but we're talking about this later. And for what it's worth, whoever made you feel bad is an idiot who doesn't deserve you." Zoe managed a weak smile. "Thanks." She returned to her work, moving through the familiar routines with mechanical precision. Polish the fixtures, vacuum the rugs, dust the ridiculous collection of antique vases that probably cost more than her life was worth. Don't think about the date. Don't think about Marcus. Don't think about how you're 28 years old and cleaning other people's houses because you never got the chance to finish college when your mom got sick. Don't think. Just work. She was so lost in her own thoughts that she almost didn't hear footsteps approaching from behind. "Ms. Carter." Zoe spun around, her heart jumping into her throat. Julian Caldwell stood in the hallway, dressed in casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly salary. She'd worked in his house for 3 years and could count on one hand the number of times he'd spoken directly to her. "Mr. Caldwell," she managed, gripping her cleaning cloth nervously. "Is something wrong? Did I miss something?" "No, nothing like that." His expression was unreadable. "I need to speak with you. Could you come to my study, please?" Zoe's stomach dropped. This was it. Someone had complained. She'd done something wrong. She was being fired. Maybe word had somehow gotten back about the date, about the scene, about her being the kind of person who humiliates herself in public cafes. "Of course," she said quietly, setting down her supplies with hands that trembled slightly. The walk to his study felt like a march to execution. Julian walked slightly ahead of her, his posture perfect, his steps measured. Zoe followed a respectful distance behind, her mind racing through every possible mistake she might have made, every room she might have cleaned inadequately. The study was exactly what you'd expect from a billionaire, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture that looked buttersoft, a desk that could have been pulled from a museum. Julian gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk. "Please sit." Zoe perched on the edge of the chair, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She couldn't remember ever being this far into the house's private areas. Staff usually stayed in the common spaces, the hallways, the rooms where the Caldwell family didn't actually live. Julian sat down across from her, and for a long moment he just looked at her. Really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. Zoe blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. I'm sorry. Tuesday night," Julian continued, his voice measured but tight with something that sounded almost like guilt. "You had a blind date at Riverside Café. The man you met was named Marcus." Zoe's blood turned to ice. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. How did he know? Why did he know? What was happening? How do you? She started but couldn't finish. "I was there," Julian said quietly. "In the corner. I watched the entire thing." The room tilted. Zoe gripped the arms of the chair to steady herself. "You were there. You saw. Everything," he confirmed. "And I need to tell you something that's going to make you very angry, and you have every right to be angry. Marcus isn't a real person looking for a date. He's an actor. I hired him." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Zoe heard them, understood the individual syllables, but couldn't make them connect into meaning. An actor. Hired. This man, her employer, sitting across from her with his expensive watch and his leather chairs and his mansion that she cleaned, had hired someone to humiliate her. "You." She had to stop and take a breath because the rage building in her chest was making it hard to speak. "You paid someone to do that to me." "Yes." "Why?" The word came out as almost a shout. Zoe never raised her voice. She was always polite, always quiet, always careful not to offend. But right now she didn't care. "Why would you do something so cruel?" Julian leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "I've been working on establishing a foundation, a program designed to help people from difficult circumstances. But I've been burned before by people who seemed genuine and turned out to be very good liars. I wanted to find someone real, someone who maintained their dignity and grace under pressure, someone who didn't become cruel when tested." "So you tested me?" Zoe's voice shook with fury. "You decided to humiliate me, to watch me cry, to see how I'd react to being treated like garbage. Also, you could evaluate my character? I know how it sounds. Do you?" Zoe stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Do you have any idea what that night was like for me? I saved for weeks for that date. I counted every dollar 3 times. I wore my only good dress. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could have one normal evening where I wasn't the poor girl who cleans houses. And you turned it into entertainment. You turned me into a spectacle." Julian's jaw tightened. "You're right. I'm right." Zoe laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that supposed to make me feel better? You're agreeing with me?" "There's more," Julian said quietly. "Someone in the cafe filmed the incident. It's gone viral. As of this morning, it has over 2 million views." Zoe sat back down. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "What?" "The video shows Marcus humiliating you. But it also shows me in the background. People recognized me. The headline currently trending is Billionaire Watches Made Get Destroyed on Blind Date. There's significant public backlash." "Good," Zoe said flatly. "You deserve it." "I do," Julian agreed. "I completely misjudged the situation. I thought I could learn something meaningful about character through manufactured adversity. Instead, I learned that I'm willing to cause real harm to a real person for an abstract goal. That makes me exactly the kind of person I claim to be trying to avoid." Zoe stared at him, trying to read his expression. He looked tired, genuinely remorseful, even. But she'd learned that people with money were very good at looking however they needed to look. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Why not just fire me and pretend none of this ever happened? Because you deserve the truth, and because I'm offering you a choice." Julian pulled out a folder from his desk drawer and slid it across to her. "Option 1. I pay you 6 months severance, write a glowing reference, and you never have to see me again. You can walk away from this job and this situation with enough money to start over somewhere else." Zoe opened the folder. The severance amount made her eyes water. It was more money than she'd made in 2 years. "And option 2? She asked warily. "Option 2 is complicated," Julian said. "The foundation I mentioned is real. The goal, helping people from difficult backgrounds access opportunities, is genuine, even if my methods were horrific. I need someone to lead it. Someone who actually understands what it's like to struggle. Someone the public will trust after this scandal. Someone who won't let me use money and power to hurt people. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you authority, Julian corrected. Complete control over the foundation's direction and programs. A salary that would put you in the top 5% of earners in this city. And the power to tell me no when I'm being an arrogant fool, which, as we've established, happens more often than it should. Zoe's head spun. This couldn't be real. 24 hours ago, she'd been crying on a bus. Now she was being offered more money than she'd ever imagined having, along with the power to actually help people like her. People who worked invisible jobs and counted dollars and wore thrift store dresses to dates because it was the best they could do. I need time to think, she said finally. Take all the time you need, Julian replied. But I should mention one more thing. The press has figured out who you are. There are reporters outside your apartment building. If you decide to take option 1 and leave, they're going to hound you for your side of the story. If you take option 2, we face them together, and we control the narrative. You mean you control it? No, Julian said firmly. I mean you control it. If you accept this position, we hold a press conference. You speak first. You say whatever you want to say about what happened and what it means. I follow your lead. The foundation becomes whatever you think it should be. This is your story to tell, Ms. Carter. I just happen to be the villain in it. Zoe stood up, clutching the folder. I need to go. Of course. Take the day. Take the week if you need it. Your job here is secure regardless of what you decide. She walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. Without turning around, she said, What you did to me was one of the cruelest things anyone has ever done. You treated me like an experiment, like I wasn't even human. That's something I won't forget, no matter how much money you offer. I know, Julian said quietly. I wouldn't expect you to. Zoe left without another word, walking through the mansion's hallways in a daze. Lena tried to stop her near the kitchen, but Zoe kept walking, out the service entrance, past the manicured gardens, to the street where reporters were already gathering. They swarmed her immediately. Ms. Carter, how does it feel to be humiliated on camera? Did you know Julian Caldwell was there? Are you going to sue? Was the date real or fake? Zoe pushed through them without responding, her head down, her heart pounding. She made it to the bus stop and collapsed onto the bench, shaking. The folder was still in her hands, wrinkled now from her grip. 6 months severance. Enough to leave the city, start over somewhere nobody knew her face. She could disappear. She could escape the cameras and the questions, and the reminder of the worst night of her life. Or she could stay. She could stand in front of those cameras and tell her story, not as a victim, but as someone with power, someone with resources, someone who could actually change things for people who were still counting $5 bills and hoping it was enough. But could she work with Julian Caldwell? Could she trust him after what he'd done? Could she look at him every day without remembering how he'd sat in that cafe and watched her cry? Her phone buzzed. A text from Lena. Please tell me you're okay. Everyone's freaking out. The news is saying crazy things. Zoe typed back. I'm okay. I think. Talk later. Another buzz. An unknown number. Ms. Carter, this is Rebecca Torres from Channel 7 News. We'd love to get your exclusive story. Name your price. Delete. Another. Zoe, this is Marcus. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would blow up like this. Please call me. Delete. Block. Another. Ms. Carter, this is Julian Caldwell's attorney. If you need legal representation, we have someone available at no cost to you. Zoe stared at that one for a long time before deleting it too. The bus arrived. Zoe got on and rode it to her apartment, where, sure enough, 3 news vans were parked outside. She slipped in through the back entrance, up the fire escape, through her neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Chun had given her a key last year after Zoe helped her when she fell, and finally into her own space. She locked the door behind her, drew the curtains, and sat on her bed with the folder spread open in front of her. The contract was detailed, specific. Julian Caldwell was offering her complete autonomy over the foundation's direction. She would have the authority to approve programs, distribute funds, hire staff, and establish priorities. The salary was absurd, more than she'd earned in 10 years of housekeeping. There were benefits, health insurance, a stipend for professional development. And there, in careful legal language, was a clause that made her pause. The executive director shall have full authority to accept or reject proposals from the board of directors, including those submitted by Julian Caldwell. In the event of unresolvable disagreement, the executive director's decision shall be final. He was giving her real power. Not just a title and a paycheck, but actual decision-making authority. Why would he do that? Was it guilt? Damage control? A calculated move to look better in the press? Or maybe, and this was the thought that kept circling in her mind, maybe he actually meant it. Maybe he genuinely realized he'd crossed a line and was trying to make amends in the only way he knew how, with money and opportunity and a chance for her to build something meaningful. Zoe looked around her tiny apartment, at the water stains she'd covered with fabric, at the space heater because the building's heat was unreliable, at the miniature refrigerator that barely held 3 days' worth of food, at the life she'd built from nothing and had somehow convinced herself was enough. She thought about all the other people living in apartments like this, working jobs like hers, counting dollars like she did. She thought about what a foundation with serious resources could do. Scholarships for people who'd had to quit college, emergency funds for medical bills, legal aid for workers facing exploitation, job training for careers that paid more than minimum wage. She thought about the woman she'd been on Tuesday night, crying outside a café because someone had made her feel worthless. And she thought about the woman she could become, someone who made sure others didn't have to feel that way, someone with the power to actually change things instead of just surviving them. Her phone rang. Julian Caldwell's name appeared on the screen. Zoe answered. I have conditions. There was a pause then. I'm listening. First, I want everything in writing, not just the contract. I want a public statement that you pay for in every major newspaper, explaining exactly what you did and apologizing directly to me by name. I want you to own it completely. Done. Second, I want the Foundation's first program to focus on domestic workers. Scholarships, emergency funds, legal aid, medical coverage. Everything we need and don't have. No corporate partnerships that would compromise that mission. Agreed. Third, you don't get to micromanage. You don't get to override my decisions. You fund it, and I run it. And if you don't like how I'm doing it, you can find someone else. But you don't get to tell me how to help people you've never been. Understood. And fourth, Zoe took a deep breath. I want you to participate in the program, not as the rich guy cutting checks, as someone who actually shows up. You're going to meet the people we help. You're going to hear their stories. You're going to understand what it's like to be powerless in a world that doesn't care if you disappear. Because if you're going to fund this, you're going to see exactly where that money goes and why it matters. There was a longer pause this time. Then, that's fair. Do you need more time to consider, or? I'll do it, Zoe said. But understand something. I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this because I forgive you or because your money makes up for what you did. I'm doing this because people like me deserve better than being invisible until we're useful. And I'm going to make damn sure this foundation actually helps them, whether that makes you look good or not. I wouldn't want it any other way, Julian said quietly. When can you start? I need a week to get my things in order. And I want Lena, my friend from the house staff, hired as my assistant. She's been more loyal to me than anyone else in my life. And if I'm doing this, she's doing it with me. Consider it done. I'll have my attorney draw up both contracts. And Ms. Carter. What? Thank you. For giving me a chance I absolutely don't deserve. Zoe hung up without responding. She sat in her apartment as the afternoon light faded, holding a contract that represented more money and power than she'd ever imagined having. Tomorrow, there would be a press conference. There would be cameras and questions and people who'd seen her worst moment asking her to explain herself. But for tonight, in this quiet moment, Zoe allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Real hope. Not the fragile kind that could be crushed by a cruel man in a cafe, but the solid kind that came from having actual power to change her circumstances and the circumstances of people like her. She picked up her phone and texted Lena. Remember how you said whoever made me feel bad was an idiot? Turns out he's a billionaire idiot. And I just made him give me his foundation. Call me when you get home. We need to talk. The press conference was scheduled for Friday morning. Zoe spent the intervening days in a whirlwind of activity, meeting with Julian's legal team, reviewing the foundation's proposed structure, drafting her statement, and preparing herself mentally for standing in front of cameras that would broadcast her face to millions of people. Lena was there for all of it, her eyes wide with disbelief. I still can't believe this is happening. 2 weeks ago, we were both scrubbing floors. Now you're going to be on TV talking about starting a foundation. We're going to be on TV, Zoe corrected. You're my assistant, remember? This is your foundation too. I don't know anything about running a foundation. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Friday morning arrived with gray skies and persistent drizzle. The press conference was held in the lobby of a hotel downtown, with rows of reporters filling the seats and cameras lining the back wall. Zoe stood backstage with Julian, both of them dressed in professional attire that felt like armor. Last chance to back out, Julian said quietly. Zoe looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since that conversation in his study. He looked nervous, genuinely nervous. This man who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions was afraid of what she might say to these cameras. Good, she thought. He should be. I'm not backing out, she said. Are you? No. Then let's go. They walked out together, but Zoe went to the podium first, as promised. The camera lights were blinding. The room was packed. She gripped the edges of the podium to keep her hands from shaking. My name is Zoe Carter, she began, her voice stronger than she felt. And I'm here to talk about dignity. She told the whole story. The blind date, the humiliation, Marcus's cruelty, the discovery that it had all been staged, Julian's confession, the viral video. She didn't hold back, didn't sugarcoat anything. I want to be clear about something, she continued. What Julian Caldwell did to me was wrong. It was cruel and manipulative and completely unacceptable. He treated me like an experiment, like my feelings didn't matter, like my dignity was something he could test for his own purposes. She paused, letting that sink in. But here's what I learned from that experience. Dignity isn't something other people give you. It's something you carry inside yourself. And nobody, not a man in a café, not a billionaire playing games, not anyone, can take it away unless you let them. She explained the foundation, the programs they were creating, the focus on domestic workers and others living in economic insecurity. This isn't about redemption for Julian Caldwell, she said firmly. This is about opportunity for people who've been working invisible jobs and living invisible lives. This is about making sure that someone's worth isn't measured by how much money they have in their wallet. This is about basic human dignity. She stepped back from the podium. Julian took her place. I don't deserve to be standing here, he said bluntly. Ms. Carter is right about everything she said. I thought I could use manufactured adversity to identify genuine character. Instead, I demonstrated my own lack of it. I've apologized to Ms. Carter privately, but I want to apologize publicly as well. What I did was inexcusable. He explained his role moving forward, funding the foundation but ceding authority to Zoe, participating in programs, meeting with the people they served. This isn't a publicity stunt, he said. This is me attempting to do something meaningful after doing something unforgivably cruel. The credit for everything good that comes from this foundation belongs to Ms. Carter and the team she's building. The blame for the incident that started it belongs entirely to me. The question and answer session was intense. Reporters wanted to know if Zoe had considered legal action, if she'd ever forgive Julian, if this was all just an elaborate way to avoid a lawsuit. Zoe answered every question with the same calm directness she'd shown throughout her statement. I'm not interested in revenge, she said. I'm interested in results. If Julian Caldwell wants to fund programs that actually help people, I'm going to make sure that money goes exactly where it needs to go. That's the only justice I care about. When it was over, when the cameras finally stopped rolling and the reporters dispersed to file their stories, Zoe and Lena stood in the empty lobby together. You were amazing, Lena said, hugging her tightly. I'm so proud of you. We haven't even started yet, Zoe replied. The hard part comes next, actually building something that works. Julian approached cautiously. You were impressive up there. Thank you for handling that with so much grace. Don't thank me, Zoe said. Just keep your promises. I will. Over the next 6 months, Zoe threw herself into the foundation's work with an intensity that surprised even her. She assembled a team of people with actual experience in social services, not just business degrees and good intentions. She met with domestic workers, listened to their needs, and designed programs based on what they actually wanted, not what wealthy donors thought they should want. The scholarship program launched first, providing funds for people who'd had to leave college due to financial hardship. Then came the emergency fund, grants for medical bills, car repairs, and other crises that could destroy someone's financial stability. Legal aid followed, offering representation for workers facing wage theft or discrimination. Julian kept his promise to participate. He showed up to meetings with scholarship recipients. He listened to their stories. Zoe watched as the reality of economic insecurity, something he'd never experienced, slowly changed his perspective on everything from minimum wage to healthcare policy. One afternoon, about 8 months after the press conference, Zoe was in her office reviewing applications when Julian knocked on her door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Sure." He sat down across from her, looking remarkably different than he had that first day in his study. Less polished, more tired, more real somehow. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "Remember that first conversation in my study, when I said I'd been burned before by people who seemed genuine? I realize now that I was looking for the wrong thing. I was trying to find people who could pass tests, who could perform authenticity. But you can't test for genuine character. You can only create environments where people have the opportunity to show it voluntarily." "Is there a point to this?" Zoe asked, not unkindly. "The point is that you were right. About everything. About dignity. About power. About the fact that you can't understand struggle just by watching it from a distance. I've learned more in the past 8 months working with you and this team than I learned in 40 years of being wealthy." "Good," Zoe said simply. "Keep learning." He smiled slightly. "You're not going to make this easy on me, are you?" "Why should I?" "No reason. You shouldn't." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm genuinely glad you took option 2. The foundation wouldn't be what it is without you. Nothing would be." After he left, Zoe sat at her desk for a long moment, staring at the office that still sometimes felt surreal. She had a salary that allowed her to live comfortably. She had meaningful work that actually helped people. She had a team that respected her. She had power, real power, not the kind that came from money, but the kind that came from doing work that mattered. She thought about that night at the café, about how thoroughly broken she'd felt, about crying on the bus, about thinking her worth could be measured in $5 bills. She'd been wrong about that. Her worth had never been about money. It had always been about the dignity she'd carried even when someone tried to strip it away. About the strength to stand back up after being knocked down. About the courage to walk into a room full of cameras and tell her story on her own terms. Power, she discovered, didn't always come from wealth. Sometimes it came from surviving humiliation and choosing to build something meaningful from the wreckage. Sometimes it came from refusing to be defined by your worst moment. Sometimes it came from taking someone's guilt money and turning it into scholarships and emergency funds and legal aid for people who needed it desperately. Zoe picked up her phone and texted Lena. "How many applications did we get for the scholarship this month?" 327, Lena responded. "We're going to need to expand the program." "Then let's expand it." Because that was the thing about power. Once you had it, you could use it to make sure other people got it too. And that, Zoe had learned, was the only kind of power worth having.